Underneath the surface of your calm, something has already begun to break. It doesn't feel like the warmth of a dawn, no gentle light spilling over the horizon. It feels like walls giving way, the floor beneath you sinking, the air growing heavy in your lungs. You tell yourself it's just exhaustion, just stress, just another chapter you'll get through. But in the places you don't let anyone see, you know this isn't another chapter. It's the burning of the whole book. The self you've been carrying for years, meticulously built, defended, refined, is crumbling in your hands, and as the fragments fall, a quieter voice moves beneath the noise. It doesn't shout, it doesn't soothe, it simply says, let it happen. We were taught to picture awakening as a climb toward the light, something clean, something linear, something free of the chaos we associate with destruction. But the soul does not rise the way your mind imagines it. It does not float. It does not politely ascend. It detonates the false floors, rips down the ornate walls you decorated with affirmations, and leaves you standing inside a skeleton of what you once called your life. You didn't lose control. You lost the illusion that you ever had it. And that moment, as violent as it feels, is not the end. It's the clearing. It's the first unfiltered breath you've taken in years, yet your ego will call it ruin, because for the ego it is. The ego's architecture is not built for the infinite. It is built for predictability, for protection, for the constant renovation of an image you can present to the world. It doesn't care if you're miserable, so long as you are consistent. And so, when the soul starts tearing through those walls, you will feel it as self-destruction. You will feel unsafe in your own skin. You will watch familiar versions of yourself dissolve, and your instinct will be to rebuild them, to patch the cracks, to call the demolition a mistake. But the soul doesn't negotiate. It doesn't stop because you're uncomfortable. It knows what the ego refuses to admit, that every layer you lose brings you closer to what you actually are, and further from what you've been rehearsing. And yet, this is where so many turn back. Not because they don't want to awaken, but because awakening rarely looks like what they've been promised. There is no constant euphoria, no perfect clarity, no golden aura that protects you from pain. Instead, there is the nakedness of not knowing who you are, the vertigo of realizing how much of your life was shaped to survive, not to be free. There are days when it feels like all that's left is raw nerve. The path to the soul is littered with the corpses of who you thought you had to be. And the more deeply you love those versions, the harder they will fight to stay alive. They will cling to habits, to beliefs, to relationships that confirm their existence. And every time you let one go, it will feel like betrayal, until you realize it's devotion. This is why awakening can feel indistinguishable from collapse. It doesn't just strip away the inauthentic. It pulls at the threads that held your entire identity together. It will take the ambitions you built from insecurity and burn them down. It will take the relationships you used as mirrors and shatter the glass. It will silence the mantras that kept you distracted and return you to a silence that is not peaceful but piercing. Your nervous system will scream for the familiar. Your body will ache for the numbness it once called stability. And yet, somewhere in that ache, a pulse returns, a rhythm that predates the first wound, the first mask, the first compromise. If you've ever been here, if you're here now, you know how tempting it is to retreat, to call this too much, to find a smaller truth you can live with and decorate it until it feels like enough. But you didn't come here for enough. You came here for the original frequency, the one you've been leaking pieces of in dreams, in quiet moments, in the way your body sometimes remembers before your mind does. And that frequency can't live in the same house as your ego's architecture. It will keep breaking the walls until the architecture is gone. Some people will call this a breakdown, and they're not wrong, but they mistake what's breaking. It's not your life, it's the casing around it. It's not your mind, it's the script it was forced to memorize. The truth is, nothing essential can be destroyed. What's burning is everything you're not. The ego calls that death, the soul calls it homecoming. And here is the paradox that most will never understand. Awakening is not the construction of something new, it is the demolition of everything false. That means it will hurt in ways you didn't prepare for. You will grieve people who are still alive. You will mourn identities you once celebrated. You will look into the mirror and not recognize the eyes staring back at you. And in the same breath, you will feel more real than you ever have. That is not madness. That is the beginning of memory. If you've ever felt this, if you've ever stood in the rubble of who you thought you were and sensed something vast moving beneath it, you're not broken. You're not failing at ascension. You are in the fire of unmaking. And if you can bear the heat, if you can resist the urge to rebuild too soon, you will find something the ego cannot comprehend. There is nothing to become, only something to return to. The soul doesn't awaken, it remembers. And when it does, the pain shifts. It doesn't vanish, but it stops feeling like punishment. It becomes a signal. It becomes proof that you are no longer anesthetized by performance. It tells you you're alive in a way the ego never allowed. And slowly, you begin to see the beauty in the rubble. The spaces where light moves freely, the cracks that become passageways, the silence that hums with a truth you don't need to name. The deeper you go, the less you will find to hold on to. The roles you once clung to like anchors, parent, lover, achiever, healer, start to dissolve into something formless. The mind panics at this. It wants reference points, labels, a clear map. It wants to know where the path ends. But the soul works in a language the mind cannot speak, and it does not draw maps, it erases them. Without those markers, you begin to walk by feel, guided not by certainty, but by resonance, by the strange pull toward what you cannot explain. And that pull will often lead you straight into the places you've spent your whole life avoiding. The myth is that awakening is about light. In truth, it is just as much about shadow, maybe more. The light shows you beauty, yes, but the shadow reveals your architecture. It shows you what you've been built from, the compromises, the bargains, the places you traded your own truth for survival. You will not like everything you see. Some of it will make you want to turn away, to insist that this darkness is separate from you. But it isn't. It's woven into the foundation, and if you don't face it, you can't dismantle it. You might think you're ready for that confrontation, but readiness is an illusion here. The truth arrives whether you are prepared or not. I've seen people who thought they had done all their healing fall apart at a single remembered moment, their body shaking, their mind refusing to process what was being returned to them. I've seen others walk willingly into their pain only to discover that the pain was not just an event, but a pattern, a shape their entire identity had been molded around. And when that pattern begins to unravel, the unmaking feels total. You may even ask yourself if there will be anything left of you when it's done. But here's the secret your ego doesn't want you to hear. There is no done. The soul doesn't finish like a project. It breathes. It expands and contracts, draws you in and out, dissolves and rebuilds in cycles that don't obey the mind's timelines. The moment you think you've arrived, something will crack open again. Not because you've failed, but because the soul will not stop until every mask has fallen. This is not cruelty. This is precision. If you can bear that, if you can live without the comfort of completion, something extraordinary begins to happen. The self you thought you were becomes less solid. The boundaries between you and everything else soften. The voice of the ego, once loud, urgent, insistent, starts to sound like background noise. And in that quiet, you can hear the hum of something much older than your identity. It is not here to fix you. It is not here to improve you. It is here to remind you that you were never broken. Still, this reminder will not come in the form you expect. It won't feel like comfort at first. It might come through loss, through betrayal, through the dismantling of a dream you thought was essential to your purpose. Each of these moments is an initiation, an invitation to stand without the structures you've leaned on. And each time you say yes, you step deeper into a truth that doesn't depend on circumstances to exist. The paradox is that the more you lose, the more whole you feel. But the ego doesn't fade without a fight. It will try to rebrand itself as spiritual. It will wear the robes of awakening, speak in the language of light, even convince you that your growth depends on keeping certain illusions alive. This is where discernment becomes vital. Not the mind's discernment, which measures and compares, but the body's, your inner tuning fork that vibrates differently in the presence of truth. That resonance will never flatter your ego, but it will always strengthen your soul. Sometimes the resonance comes as a whisper, "Don't rebuild." Other times it roars, "Burn more." Either way, it will not negotiate. You can delay it, but you cannot outrun it. And every time you choose the truth over the familiar, you train your nervous system to recognize freedom, not as a concept, but as a lived, cellular reality. That is when the collapse stops feeling like death and starts feeling like birth. Not the clean kind, the kind where the walls close in, where every breath is a push, where the old world falls away behind you. And yes, it will hurt. It will exhaust you. It will strip away the parts of you that could never have survived in the light you're moving toward. But one day you will look back and realize that none of it was punishment. It was preparation. The soul isn't trying to destroy your life, it's trying to return it to you, whole, undiluted, free. And so you keep walking, even when the ground beneath you feels like it's disappearing. You stop looking for the horizon because you realize the path was never straight. It was a spiral, pulling you closer to a center you can't yet see. The ego keeps asking, "When will this be over?" But the soul only answers with silence because it knows that endings are just disguises for deeper beginnings. Every time you think you've reached the bottom, another layer reveals itself, not to torture you, but to free you from the anchors you didn't even know you had. This is why awakening feels like self-destruction. The self you're losing was never truly you, it was the architecture built around your fear. That structure was intricate, familiar, even comforting in its predictability, but it was a cage, and the moment you begin to see the bars for what they are, you cannot unsee them. You can try to decorate them, hang new curtains on the prison walls, convince yourself it's safer inside, but the knowing will haunt you. It will whisper every night, "You are not meant to live small." This haunting is not cruelty, it's the soul refusing to let you forget. It's the reason your old coping mechanisms stop working. It's why the things that once brought you joy now feel hollow. The life you built while half asleep cannot sustain you when you begin to wake. The frequencies don't match anymore, and every attempt to force them into alignment will feel like wearing clothes that no longer fit. They pinch, they tear, they remind you with every movement that you've outgrown them. At some point, you realize that nothing external can guide you through this terrain. Teachers can point, books can inspire, rituals can steady your breath, but the work is in the marrow. It's in the moments when no one is watching, when you're lying in the dark, and the silence is so deep you can hear the old identities trying to negotiate their way back into existence. You'll hear them promise safety, comfort, even love, but it will always be conditional. It will always ask you to shrink. If you've come this far, you already know the cost of saying yes to that bargain. You already know that every time you trade your truth for acceptance, a part of you goes dim. And the soul will not tolerate dimming for long. It will create circumstances that force you to choose, cling to the known or step into the void. The void isn't empty. It's full of everything you thought you had to sacrifice to survive. Stepping into it isn't a leap of faith, it's a homecoming. By now, you've learned that the healing you thought you were doing in the beginning was just maintenance, keeping the old structure livable. But the soul doesn't want you to live in a renovated prison. It wants you to step outside the walls entirely, to feel what it's like when your boundaries aren't made of fear but of truth. That shift changes everything. You stop moving to avoid pain and start moving toward resonance. It's here, in this raw and unguarded state, that the body starts to remember what the mind has long forgotten. The patterns you thought were permanent begin to dissolve. The trauma no longer defines you, not because it's gone, but because it's no longer the center of your story. You didn't erase the wound, you reclaimed the power it once held over you. And that's when you realize, you didn't remember the truth, it remembered you. Now every choice feels different. You stop asking, will this keep me safe, and start asking, will this keep me true? Safety becomes irrelevant when you realize that the soul's definition of safety is freedom. And freedom is not about avoiding danger, it's about not being owned by it. You begin to walk lighter. The grief is still there, the memories still flicker, but they no longer pull you backward. Instead, they stand behind you like silent witnesses, watching as you step into a life that doesn't require you to betray yourself to belong. And so you arrive, not at an end, but at a threshold. On one side is everything you've known, everything that once defined you. On the other is everything you've yet to remember. Crossing it is not a single act, it's a rhythm, a pulse. Every breath you take in truth pulls you further across, until one day you realize you can't even see the old shore. There's no going back, not because it's forbidden, but because there's nothing there for you anymore. The soul smiles at this. It knows that what you call destruction was always creation in disguise. And as you take that next step, it's no longer about healing or awakening or becoming. It's about remembering you have always been the light and the shadow, the collapse and the rebirth, the question and the answer. The only thing left is to live from it, to embody it, to let it speak through you until the last mask falls. Tell me, are you ready to stop surviving and start remembering? Welcome home.